Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Lauren Conlin, and welcome to Pop Crime TV's The Outlier podcast, recapping the United States versus Sean Combs Week 5. Now, for Week 5, we essentially saw Jane on the stand for most of the week. She finished off her direct testimony and her cross, and as a reminder, Jane is a pseudonym, and there were some kind of behind the scenes issues. One thing I do want to point out is that when I did the last update for Crime Junkie Jury, which you will hear day 23, that's the last update, I had stepped outside before the juror number 6 issue was discussed. So in my recap, I kind of surmise, the judge did say it probably isn't a big deal, and I had thought that he would most likely stay on. Well, that may not be the case. I'm just going to say it right now, but keep in mind this is sort of what happened at the end of the day on Friday, which was June 13th. But the judge said that most likely he will dismiss this juror, although he did thank the defense for their arguments. And he said, if anything changes, I'll let you know over the weekend. So technically, the juror has not been officially dismissed, but we think that it's going to happen. And this is because, essentially because of a residency issue. And I do get into that issue, so I won't go too deep on that right now. But the judge, after looking through some transcripts and looking deeper into the issue, I think at lunch on the 13th, he kind of came back at the end of the day and agreed with the government who wanted this juror dismissed. And he said, I want them dismissed due to lack of candor, because it seems like they were shading their answers about their residency when they were questioned 2 to 3 times after this issue came up in order to stay on the jury. So this juror, it is a male, I'll just say it. This juror kind of said he lived with his aunt in the Bronx, but then had said he stays in Jersey with his girlfriend and his baby daughter. And I think that it got a little bit confusing, and the government, again, just thought it was inconsistent, but they were looking a little bit deeper in saying, okay, well, this guy clearly just wants to stay on the jury right now. That's why he's not being totally truthful, whereas the defense really would like him to stay because he is one of the 4 black jurors. So I will see exactly what happens on Monday when I get back to court. So, and it'll be week 6 by then. Whew, I am so ready for this trial to end, as I'm sure everybody else is. But with that being said, again, just reminding everybody that the recaps that you are about to hear, I am doing these for Crime Junkie Jury, and it's just much easier for me to rip the audio here and put it all together in one podcast to give you your week 5 recap. All right, without any further ado, I will play the recap and then I will close us out. We are on day 19 of the United States versus Sean Combs. Jane, still on the stand. And we went through her direct examination today. It continued. And we started off with something really mysterious in court this morning. I still do not know what happened, but the lead counsel for the defense and the government, they were each called into the judge's robing room, which is a room where everything is off the record. The defense counsel came out after, and so did the government. They each went to their team and they kind of did this huddle. And I noticed that at different times, both teams appeared to be smiling. I still don't know what happened. Some people speculated that maybe there was a juror issue, although all the jurors came out and everything was fine. So again, not sure. But we continued with Jane, and she talked a lot about, we saw so many texts between Jane and Diddy, and how Jane really, she put everything in writing. She really did not want to participate doing these hotel nights, these FOs, this debauchery with other men. She told Diddy multiple times through text messages, I feel like sex was sacred and now it's not. And, he would pushed back about the rent and the house, which I think I've mentioned before. And she also made it clear, by the way, that he has 2 phones, and she texted him on 2 phones, and he actually had a third phone, or they had a third phone together for explicit videos that they would take. She said she was paranoid because his assistants had access to his phones, and she didn't want them to see anything that they did in private. So let's see. Again, she talked about a specific instance where they got into an argument because she was told by Diddy that he would take her on this yacht. And this was Miami. He would take her on this yacht ride to this private island. And this was after they were going to have a hotel night. And he never ended up taking her, and she was disappointed. Well, she heard on a podcast about how Diddy took another woman on this yacht ride, and how they had intercourse for 48 hours, something like that. And she confronted him about it in a text, and she was really upset about it. And he said, baby girl, that's just podcast talk. It's nothing. And she was supposed to come to New York, and she's like, I'm not coming. She said, I'm not going to be, I don't want to come to New York to be treated like in a hotel room. So she was upset. I guess they FaceTime. He said, I'm tired of your allegations, whatever. And they end up getting on a FaceTime. And then after the FaceTime, the text messages are pleasant again. And she said that he calmed her down. He kind of convinced her all was okay. And then she ended up going to New York. So she feels better about this, but then she says she's on a plane. And then, and he also said, don't worry, it'll be just us. We'll go to dinner. We'll go shopping. No hotel nights. So she's on the plane. She's all excited. She's in the air, and she gets a text from him, and it's him showing her a photo from somebody from Cowboys for Angels, which is the escort service. Like, do you like this guy? And she said her heart just sank, and she's like, oh, and she kind of pretended she didn't get service, whatever. She lands in New York. She said it's really late, and she was picked up by a driver to the Trump Hotel. She meets Diddy out at this lounge, I guess, for a little bit. But again, it's super late, and they go to this lounge. She said they kind of bicker a little bit, and then they end up going to a hotel and being with somebody after. So she's pretty disappointed. And she also said that she, in September of 2023, she texted one of the entertainers or the escorts, and his name is Cabral. And she basically said that she texted him on behalf of Diddy while she was in New York, and arranged for him to come and fly to New York to be with them. So that was the whole thing. And also, just to sort of, I guess, attach some of this stuff to the indictment, I was thinking that the whole I promise I'll take you on this private island type of thing goes to fraud when he didn't. Obviously, the booking of the escort to New York for them, transportation to engage in prostitution. Okay, so then we get to, let me see. We get to more text messages where she says things like, my soul is tired. I'm exhausted from this. And again, Diddy takes that to say, we're breaking up. And then he hangs the house over her head, etc. And throughout all of this, the theme is that he really seems to call her crazy. That seems to be his catchphrase. I believe I've reported that before. You're crazy. You're crazy. You're acting crazy. So she talks about another instance where they have a sobriety party type of thing, but really that's doing a hotel night without drugs. And this was pretty disturbing. In particular, she talked about how she was with 2 to 3 entertainers or escorts, and between the second and the third escort, she threw up. Like, she vomited in the toilet at the hotel. And Diddy comes in and he's like, okay, great. Now you're going to feel better after this. And then he escorts her out, and she's made to continue. And then she also talked about that after this night with the 3 escorts, this sobriety night, she got very ill. She had a horrible UTI and a horrible yeast infection. And then she's fighting with him when they're in separate locations after this. And Gina is brought up, and sometimes she's called Gina and sometimes she's called another woman. We also heard a lot about Gina through Cassie as well. Same way, another woman, Gina, both ways. So I guess that Jane was sending him something about being jealous of Gina. And this came up later too. She actually called him a pedophile for dating Gina, but the government said, she was over 18, right? She was over, and she's like, yes, she was just 25 years his junior. So I would just kind of poke at him for that. So anyway, so after this night where she gets very ill and they're in separate locations, she texts him and says, can you put money in my account or something like that? And no response. And I think she sort of assumed he's off with Gina or whoever, and she's pissed, she's upset. So she sends him another text the next day, and she's like, I don't care about, your hoes. She said, you have me feeling a little crazy right now. You do all this stuff, and then you don't talk to me, and, you ignore me. Can you put something in my account? And then we're played this audio message of Diddy just being like, I'm not with any hoes. I'm in Miami. You're crazy. It was just, same of what we heard last week as well. And then what I thought was interesting is she talked about a time where she texted him, she said something along the lines of, I know I was consenting, because when she told him she didn't like these videos, he would say, well, these hotel nights, he said, well, if anybody saw the videos that we took, they would think that you're enjoying yourself. And that's when she's like, I know that I was consenting, but come on. So she talked about having PTSD from these hotel nights, needing to find a therapist. She talks about how he was gaslighting her too, because he's like, look, you're the one that's finding these escorts and texting them, which is kind of what he had Cassie do as well. But again, it's always at his directive. Also, there was a recording played towards the end of the morning, and this recording was right around the time when Cassie's lawsuit dropped, and he's upset, and he says something to Jane, something like, this isn't being recorded, is it? And we in the gallery, the jury, everybody in the courtroom, we don't actually know where this recording came from. If Jane recorded it, I don't think she did. This is 2023, and you'll kind of find out why in a minute. Some people speculated a wiretapping that KK did this, the assistant. I mean, who knows? We don't know just yet. But let's see. I'm gonna skip through to some of the back and forth with the text messages and stuff and get to the afternoon, where we found out that Diddy still pays for Jane's lawyer. And I mean the lawyer that was with her in court. She initially got a lawyer when HSI actually showed up at her house after they searched Diddy's home in 2024. They showed up at her house. She wasn't home. She said she saw it through her ring cam, and they left a card, and Diddy said, yeah, get a lawyer. And again, he still pays for her lawyer to this day. And then she talks about having to use these lawyers or contacting the lawyers when Cabral, the escort they used, actually said that he had an S tape of Jane and Diddy. And she was thinking, like, how did he get this? Well, at one point during the session, Diddy thought he was using his phone to record, but he was actually using Cabral's. So he had that. Jane says she flipped out. She called her lawyer, and they said, yeah, obviously don't pay him anything. Don't worry about it. Like, you need to tell him this is extortion, and you have legal representation. So she does. And she said she doesn't hear anything further for a while until she gets a call from a big media company. We don't know who this media company is, but essentially they asked her for a comment. And they said, do you have a comment before we release this tape? And she said she nearly fainted. Now, this tape never came out. She said Diddy's legal team handled it, although she doesn't actually know what went down. Then we fast forward to May of 2024, the month that the CNN video was released of Diddy beating Cassie. She describes being asleep with him in his master bedroom in Miami. One of his sons knocks on the door to deliver this news. And she kind of says she didn't really see him the rest of the day. He was really huddled with his family, with some of his friends. I think trying to figure out what to put out to the public. She said she got to the breakfast table, she sees the video and she wasn't hungry anymore. And eventually he kind of like loops her in and he said, this was a one-time thing with me and Cassie. He said that Cassie was, quote, a hitter. And he ends up showing her a final draft of this apology. And she said that she approved of the apology. She was like, yeah, this is good. I like it, whatever. And there was a line of questioning that was started by the government where Maureen Comey, who was doing the direct, said, when the video came out, how did you feel? And she started to say she was disappointed. And you could tell she was getting she was hinting that she was disappointed that he did not say Cassie's name. Now there was an objection, and then there was a sidebar, and there was a break. The jury was dismissed, and then there was a discussion. And I thought this was so interesting because I was one of those people as well that was like, oh, this apology is horrible. He didn't even say Cassie's name. I was very disappointed by that. And Mark Agnifilo gets up and he's like, this is attorney-client information. This is privileged. I am the one that told him to not say Cassie by name because I felt that a grand jury was going to be convened and Cassie's name would be dropped. So I was the one that said, do not say her name. And so Agnifilo just said, I don't know why this is relevant. I would really like for the question and the answer of disappointment to be struck. And that is essentially what happened. So I also thought it was crazy to be in the courtroom and hear this apology. We didn't see the video. They weren't playing it for the reason that they were kind of not putting all the evidence on the screen because of Jane's privacy. But we heard the video, and just to be in the same room as Diddy, like 20 feet away, was crazy. And he wasn't reacting. He was just really stoic listening to this video. So again, at the end of the video, he says, I'm working on being a better man. And Maureen Comey really highlighted this part because then she says, okay, well, let's go to June of 2024. What happened? And Jane knew the date, June 18th, 2024, immediately. And she knew this date because it was very significant to her. Diddy goes to her house for a date, the house that he pays for. She describes setting it up all nice for him, stocking the fridge. His assistant, Jonathan, helped out, put candles everywhere, and they get in this big fight. He had just returned from a family trip in Utah, which she thought was a trip with another woman. She said she had a little bit of champagne and tequila. He had the same, and she asked him about this. And he gets kind of angry, and they bicker, and she gets really mad. And I think this was a tipping point for Jane, if I had to just throw that out there. But she describes slamming his head when he was bent over to tie his shoe into like a marble counter. And, she kind of runs away. She locks the bedroom door to the master bedroom. He's chasing her. He's screaming. He kicks the door down. So she goes to the master bathroom. He's screaming. He kicks that door off the hinges, apparently, all the way off the hinges. She runs to the master closet. Sorry, she shuts the door, locks it, and she describes changing into like a loose-fitting dress so she can run. And he kicks that door down as well. And now she starts to run. She gets sort of to the entryway, she describes, and at one point, by the way, she said she was throwing candles and glass at him, and he didn't appear to be hit. But she gets to the door. And he ends up kicking her and then putting her in a chokehold and kind of like dragging her away. And then she squirms out and she runs. And she said she's barefoot. She runs a couple of blocks and she hides like behind this wall. She described it for what felt like 2 hours, but it probably wasn't, she said. She walks back to the house thinking he was gone, and he's still there. And she describes seeing him running to the backyard, getting into like a fetal position. And she said he punched her in the temple twice. He kicked her while she was on the ground. She gets back inside, and she said that she decides to go in the shower and cool off. And while she's in the shower, he follows her into the shower and he slaps her across the face 3 times, and she kind of loses her balance and she falls. And at another point, let me see. Oh yeah, sorry. Right before this, I forgot one thing before the shower. She grabbed his phone and she called the woman, I think to be Gina, that she thought he was away with in Utah. And now she says that and again, I do not know that it's Gina. I am speculating, but calls a woman and says, was he with you? Da da da. And she said this woman just starts hurling all these nasty insults at her, name calls and whatever. And Diddy now is holding her down, forcing her to listen to these insults. And she said that she finally yells, "He's beating my ass." And then Diddy hangs up the phone. And then she goes into the shower. So she gets out of the shower and she says she finds Diddy with her phone and he's texting an entertainer or escort, Anton. And she can see this because she has her text mirrored on her TV screen. So he apparently scrolls up and sees some text messages between her and Anton talking about their mutual friends. And he's like, "Who are your mutual friends? You've no mutual friends with this entertainer." And it turns out she kept this from him, but she went with another rapper and his girlfriend. We don't know who this is, an unnamed rapper and his girlfriend, to Vegas in January of 2024. And this rapper and his girlfriend used Anton for a session, and she watched. Jane watched, and she said, "I didn't do anything. I didn't cheat on you. I'm so sorry, whatever." And Diddy appears to be pretty mad, but he invites Anton over, and she's in the bathroom, and Diddy, she describes him giving her an ecstasy pill and saying, "You're not going to F up my night. You're going to go out there and you're going to do this." And he says some explicit things. He says, "You're going to S his D or you're going to F him. I don't care what." And she says, "I don't want to." And according to Jane, he looks at her and says, "Is this coercion?" So she doesn't say anything, I guess. And she goes out and she gives him oral. And so she describes feeling horrible, terrible, that, she was just outside of her own body and it was awful. And after that, she said that Diddy still wouldn't really let up on the Anton mutual friend thing. He was berating her for 2 hours. She talked about how the assistant sent money over so she could pay Anton, and they sent extra money for the doors and all the damage as well. What else? I mean, that was pretty much it. I mean, she did describe seeing him a couple of days after that because she, quote, missed him so much, but it was still very awkward. So I will pick up tomorrow with anything I left off. It was kind of a doozy of an afternoon, but she is set to start her cross-examination tomorrow. And I know that she is to be out of court by Thursday because she has a trip planned. So we will see what happens, but thank you all for listening. I know this was a lot, and I'm sorry. I should have issued a trigger warning, but all right, guys, that was Diddy, day 19 of his federal trial. We are on day 20 of the United States versus Sean Combs. What a day we had today in court, with the beginning of Jane, and that's a pseudonym, her cross-examination, which was done by Tenny Garagos. But I want to talk about what happened this morning before the jury came in. I had mentioned the day before that there might be a potential juror issue. The judge was in the robing room with both lead counsels, and it turns out that there is a juror issue. And the defense kind of let it slip that it's juror number 6. Obviously, nobody knows who that is, but I'm just letting you guys know it was juror number 6. We don't know exactly what happened, but what we do know is that the defense seems to be okay with letting them stay. And the government just said they need to look further into the issue before making any decisions here. So we'll find out soon enough, probably tomorrow. The mistrial was also denied. And the judge basically said that Nicole Westmoreland, during the cross-examination of Brianna Bongolan, she had this Perry Mason moment, and it wasn't exactly fodder for a mistrial. And this Perry Mason moment was when she called Bongolan out about the date, the metadata on the photograph, because Diddy was away. And, Alexandra Shapiro kind of said, well, they believe that the government knew that Bongolan was essentially perjuring herself because they had the date of the photo, they had the invoice of the hotel prior to her testimony, and they let her on the stand anyway. So that's what she was arguing. Also, Shapiro was arguing part of Jane's testimony. She's kind of said, promised quality time is not a federal crime. And I thought that was interesting because I brought that up thinking that, okay, I think this goes to fraud in the indictment, telling Jane that she'd be taken to this island, this private island, and they'd spend time together when they didn't. So Shapiro is writing a motion for that. And the government had written a motion to recall Dr. Don Hughes to talk about trauma, love bombing, and just testimony that would also play into Jane's testimony. And that was denied. The judge kind of cited that it would be prejudice to the defense because, it would sort of indicate to the jury that this witness is more important than other witnesses because they were called twice. So that was essentially the extent of what happened this morning. But let's get into Jane's cross this morning, obviously before lunch, because it got crazier after lunch. But Tenny Garagos, her cross-examination, at the beginning, it felt more like a conversation. And Tenny, her style is much less aggressive than Nicole Westmoreland, than Brian Steele. She's very conversational. You kind of feel like you're talking to a girlfriend, or that was my impression. But she indicated that Jane had met with the government 24 times before taking the stand, and she had actually met with the defense twice as well, and that even though Diddy pays for her attorney, he has not interfered, and they have not seen each other or talked to one another since he was arrested in September of 2024. Now, Tenny also brought up the fact that Jane, she'd indicated that she was a content creator and she couldn't really work when she was with Diddy or during that time because she was so focused on him. And it turns out Jane actually has a dress line as well as a swimsuit line. So she's also an entrepreneur, and she did have this line while she was dating Diddy. And not only did she have it, but Diddy invested money and in her line, and it was profitable at one point. And Jane testified that he was very encouraging to her. He would try to lift her up, and he made her a better person, is kind of what she said. And he would try to, encourage her entrepreneurial spirit. So this kind of came later in the afternoon, but this was the dress line was brought up this morning. But Tenny Garagos essentially said, well, you said in 3 years of being with Diddy, you didn't really do anything. You didn't accomplish anything, but you had 2 fashion lines. And then she brought up the fact that she had this big house that was twice the size of her old apartment, indicating that her child could, run around and just live a better life. And so she was like, so you had 2 businesses while you were dating him. You got to live in this beautiful house, and your one of your businesses actually profited. So you did something. And Jane kind of said, well, it is what it is, but I know that I could have done better, or I could have done more if I wasn't really focused on him. Now, some odd things this morning that we heard from Jane is how much she liked to take care of Diddy after these hotel stays, give him massages, cook for him. She talked about giving him foot rubs. And then she said that she liked to bathe him after, which kind of elicited some smirks in the gallery as well as the jury. She also said that Diddy's favorite show is Dateline, and they would watch it together and fall asleep. And again, that everybody was kind of like, really? Dateline? Okay. But yeah, Tenny also brought up the fact that one of the reasons they got this house, and this was indicated through text messages between Jane and Diddy, was for privacy. And privacy meaning they didn't want their business at these hotels as much, having the entertainer there, the escort there. So this was indicated through a text message, like Jane saying, yeah, we should get this house for privacy. And also she mentioned the school district is better for her child. But again, they were pointing out to us that Jane was acknowledging they needed privacy for this specific reason. And also, we heard yesterday about Jane and Diddy having a phone just to take these videos, explicit videos. And we also saw text messages from Jane saying that she wished she was with Diddy so they could watch these videos together of her being with other men. And Young Miami was brought up today, and how Jane was very jealous of the public relationship that he had with Young Miami. And I'll get into this after, but something that came up in the afternoon that was very, very spicy. But yeah, she talked about being jealous of Young Miami. She talked about how, that he bought her a Maybach, and she described kind of like Tenny actually got her to say that she was jealous of this Maybach, and that she ended up getting a Van Cleef and Arpels necklace after she kind of made a thing about the Maybach. And we heard that Diddy was also dating Gina and a woman named Jessie. I don't know a last name. She told us that Diddy was on antidepressants, which none of us had heard before. And we also heard more voice notes from Diddy. And Tenny indicated that the voice notes we heard the other day, those were one or two out of thousands that he sent over 3.5 years, or hundreds rather. And the voice note that we heard from Diddy at first was talking about a Turks and Caicos trip they just took together, Diddy and Jane, and he had this nickname for her, Crack Pipe. And I guess because she's so addictive. And she sent him a message back also calling him a crack pipe. And this trip to Turks also included entertainers, which Tenny made sure that the jury knew about this. This trip included entertainers, and Jane is saying that she had an amazing time. And of course, Jane has said numerous times, and this she'll add on to her response by saying, yes, I had a good time because of the time that I got to be alone with him. She also talked about the fact that he introduced her to gospel and gospel music, and they would watch sermons together, and she still watches some of these sermons to this day. And okay, this was the crazy part. She actually talked about researching why Diddy would be into watching her have intercourse with another man, and she came across the word cuckold. So she kind of referred to Diddy as a cuck on the stand, and then indicated that she did further research and described that cucks can sometimes have bisexual curiosity, meaning that they don't necessarily want to do same-sex things themselves, but they want their partner to do this so they can kind of watch and explore. And a bunch of us in the row, we were writing notes and we were like looking at each other like, whoa, she said it. And she testified I'm still in the morning, that KK, Diddy's assistant, didn't really like her. And that was kind of a problem. She had strong opinions about her, and KK was such a big part of Diddy's life that, it kind of made their relationship difficult at times. And there was a time this morning that the drug transporting came up with Jane. I'm sorry. And there were text messages between Jane and KK about this, but KK kind of indicated in these text messages that she didn't really know what was going on because she didn't have information about these drugs. It was one of the security guards that did. And Tenny kept saying, you didn't talk to KK about this on the phone. You just texted. And Jane said, oh, well, we did talk for 1 minute, but it seemed like Tenny wanted to get all this out there. And I didn't quite understand why. I still don't necessarily understand why. I'm thinking that she wanted to talk about KK not having information or all the information about drugs to sort of pull her back from being a, quote, co-conspirator, which would align with the RICO charge. So that's a speculation, but we kind of stopped there. So there wasn't much more about KK and the drugs and the texting. Let me see, make sure I didn't. We saw a lot more about Jane and Diddy kind of going back and forth about when she would indicate she didn't necessarily want to be with these escorts, how they would talk about the house, or they would talk about how, it was brought up before that Diddy would say, okay, well, do you need 3 months? And Tenny Garrigos was kind of turning that into a positive, because with the house, Diddy had paid the security deposit, and he had paid the first month and the last month, and then he offered this 3-month thing if they were to break up. So Tenny was kind of like, well, that's ample amount of money, is it not? And I think that Jane was just trying to get across, like, that's beside the point, but it was brought up. And also we saw text messages where Diddy would say, we don't have to do this. We don't need to be with an escort. It can be just us, or entertainer. And let me see. Yes. Okay. So let's get to the afternoon, because that's where it got pretty crazy and spicy. So a lot of the afternoon was spent on very explicit and graphic text messages between Jane and Diddy, and a lot of these messages included Jane fantasizing about the entertainers. The defense really wanted to get that in, get that out there. And I'm telling you, one of the female jurors was horrified. It was uncomfortable. I won't lie. And Tenny had Jane read some of these. I can't say them on YouTube. I cannot say them. But yeah, so that was a majority of the afternoon, and most likely got her kind of primed up for this moment. So this was a moment where we started off with a text message between Diddy and Jane, where Diddy is saying he misses her, and then he kind of brings up wanting to see her with these two escorts, or two different escorts, Paul and Cabral, and she's kind of placating, playing back, and then apparently she sees something on Instagram of him buying another woman, who I believe is Young Miami, a Chanel bag. So Jane is kind of like, I didn't really sign up for this, you being with another person publicly, while I'm over here doing these hotel nights. And also she's like, you didn't really miss me. You just want me to set up this hotel night, and you're over there with this other woman. And she said something like, you're even buying her Chanel bags, LOL. And let me get to the exact section, because, okay. So this encounter, or this back and forth, elicited a gasp from the jury, looks in the gallery, and Diddy's face was like he kind of looked like a child because he was just so shocked. So when Tenny had asked her, okay, so he got this woman a Chanel bag, well, were you upset that you didn't get a Chanel bag? And she basically said no. And she said, well, you didn't get a Chanel bag, but you did get a Bottega bag, because she had testified he got her a Bottega bag one day, and you did get a Van Cleef necklace. And Jane said, I got trauma. And everyone's like, okay. And then she said, how much is a Bottega bag? This is Tenny. And Jane said, how much is my body worth? And then it got a little spicy. And then Tenny said, well, what is a Bottega bag? And she goes, you should know, you probably have one. And Tenny's like, I don't actually. And then the judge was like, okay, Jane, can you please just answer the questions as you are asked? Like, please pull back a little bit. And then Jane actually asked for a break after that. So it definitely got a little bit spicy. And she took a break. She came back, and she actually ended up apologizing, and it was fine. They moved along at that point. But let me see what else. What else? Okay, so pretty much the last part of today's cross was a text message where Jane had told Diddy that she feels the sexiest for these hotel nights when she's drinking wine. And she gets wine intoxicated. And Diddy said, oh, I didn't know that. And this is via text. I don't have to give you Molly, or we don't have to do Molly. And, so Tenny was like, okay, so he didn't know this. And he's saying, well, we don't have to do drugs together. And then Jane indicates that, okay, it's fine. Don't worry. We can still do this debaucherous night the next day after I have something else. They had brought some date up before. And then Diddy responds with, we don't have to go crazy, meaning debauchery, for the rest of the year. And Jane indicates on the stand that this was him with undertones of being disappointed in her, because she says back to that, it's okay with me, meaning it's okay that we do this debauchery. So, and then, the text message continues on where she says, I love it all with you. And then Diddy writes back, I love the times that it's just me and you. So the defense really wanted to highlight this. And then there was just another moment that the defense highlighted about, I think it was, July of 2024. Jane actually said she missed one of the escorts or entertainers, Paul, and it was her idea, I guess, to invite Paul over to their LA home or her LA home. And she actually said she had made love to Paul or referred to their time as making love. Diddy was there, but that's pretty much where we ended for today. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to the Daily Diddy Digest. I know that was a lot, and we will continue with the cross-examination of Jane tomorrow, and I'll be back then. Thanks for listening to the Daily Diddy Digest. We are on day 21 of the United States versus Sean Combs, and right away, I just want to point out that the government said that they will likely conclude their case in chief by the end of next week, which would be June 20th. They said there is a chance that they may finish by Wednesday, which would be June 18th. So we'll see. They might scrap some witnesses. And the defense said that their case in chief, they're not sure how long that will go. That will depend on who the defense decides to scrap as a witness, if any. Okay, Jane is still on the stand doing her cross-examination, and it was not as intense as yesterday. It actually was a really short day in court. We started at 1 and we actually finished around 4:30. So this update will be pretty brief, but right off the bat, we saw a text and an incident where Jane saw that Diddy was with Young Miami off on a vacation, and this was February. And it turns out that both Jane and Young Miami have birthdays in February. And right away, I'm not sure if I brought this up, not right away, but just as some context, Diddy had told Jane that he was polyamorous, that he wasn't exactly monogamous, and Jane wasn't happy about this, but she kind of dealt with it because she loved him. And we've heard this a lot. So she kind of knew he was dating Young Miami, not thrilled about it, but it turns out Jane was planning this very special Valentine's hotel night for Diddy, and he kind of knew about it. So we see text messages where Jane says to him, "Get your ass home from this island or this excursion with Young Miami, or else Valentine's Day is off." So Jane said, yes, I did kind of threaten a hotel night, but that was the only time. What we saw a lot of today were very sentimental text messages from Jane to Diddy saying how much she loved him. I mean, one text in particular was like she got on her knees and prayed to God and said how much she loved him and how thankful she was. And all of these texts were specifically after trips or times with Diddy where a hotel night with an entertainer was involved. And one text in particular that she had to read, she was saying how much she loved him because he made her child so happy about something. And she broke down. She was very upset on the stand. She was crying. I don't want to say she was sobbing, but she was close, and she almost had to take a break, but she managed to pull it together to continue. We saw a lot of text messages, again, of Jane setting up the hotel nights, texting with the entertainers, appearing to be friendly with them. We saw text messages between Jane and Diddy where she would say, "I don't really feel like doing it tonight." And he would say, "No problem." And Jane explained that she knew deep down he was really upset. She would try to give context around this. And at one point there was, I don't want to say it was a tense exchange because it was nothing like yesterday, but there was an exchange where Tenny Garagos would say, "You had this hotel night and you agreed to it." And Jane would say, "Unfortunately, yes." And she said, "Unfortunately," before she would say yes quite frequently. So Tenny Garagos was like, "Okay, you keep saying unfortunately yes, but did you agree to it or not?" And she said, I regret it and I resent him for it. And Tenny said, "You regret it now." That was like a whole thing. She was like, "What you're saying is you regret it now after the fact, but you did say yes to all of this." She also, they showed us, or they didn't show us, we heard the video, the jury saw it, of after a breakup that Diddy and Jane had. They took a video of themselves, and again, we just heard it. We heard a lot of kissy noises. like it literally was like, mwah, mwah, mwah. It was kind of gross. But I actually saw two of the jurors smile at this, kind of laughing, because they're making these kissy noises, and Diddy kind of said, this woman lifts me up and when I need it, and I'm so glad we're back together, type of thing. And Jane echoed the same thing, that, he lifted her up, etc. We also heard about her birthday, Jane's birthday, and how she texted Diddy, this was 2023, to put something in her account so she could take her friends and family to dinner, and she wanted an outfit. And Tenny said, so did you have a good birthday? And she's like, no, I didn't. I was having a really hard time. And Tenny was like, so you didn't have a good birthday that Mr. Combs paid for, put money in your account so all your friends and family would have fun, yada, yada. And then it segued into this whole thing where he had taken Young Miami out to another hotel or something, or out to dinner. And Jane felt like he had booked her at the Nobu Hotel in Miami because Nobu, the restaurant, was just downstairs and they wouldn't have to leave the hotel. And she wanted to go out in public with him. So she had this whole thing, like, directly after, or maybe it was before, I'm not certain. But yeah, he wanted to like keep me holed up in the Nobu Hotel in Miami and not take me out. Like, I kind of knew what he was doing there, type of thing. And we heard a lot about Gina, again, this other woman, where they would fight about Gina. And she said Gina was trash. She was so toxic. And that was, I think, a cause of one of their breakups, where this video came into play. And we heard about basically months where they would go without hotel night. So there was a significant amount of, not amount of months, but there was a couple months and a significant amount of days where she would read off text messages of them, getting together, hanging out, ensuring that the jury knew and we knew that there were no hotel nights involved. There were no escorts involved. This was just strictly them. Let me see. Oh, and they brought up the New York trip that Jane had talked about being upset about, because Diddy texted her a picture of an escort on a plane when she kind of said, she didn't want to do it. And she was disappointed because they didn't go out that night that she got there. And the defense wanted to let us know that this week in particular was very busy for Diddy because he had just released an album. And so he had all this press stuff to do with his album. And so he was very tired by the time she got in. And so they went to this lounge, whatever. And I think a couple days later, or a day later or so, they had a hotel night. But the defense was trying to provide context around that. And then there was another tense moment, because there was some text exchanges about Jane. I guess she made like a food post or something, and Diddy had her take it down. She tagged him in it, but she saw that Gina made a very public post about this love necklace that Diddy got her. And it turns out that Jane had a love bracelet that kind of matched the necklace. And anyway, she kind of said, like, you made me take this post down and she got to keep this up. You might as well just give her my bracelet to go with her necklace, type of thing. And yeah, it was just, it was a lot of, again, back and forth messages about Jane saying how she had a great time after the, an escort night, and also how they would have movie nights, she and Diddy, and watch these movies that they made, and they would watch them back, and they would talk about it, and they would have a good time and say, talk about doing another one. And she also talked about, or it came up, that Jane would be the one to go to the sex store and buy certain things. She talked about buying the Rhino pill for men, which helps them get it up. So things would move along faster. And she had Diddy take this and the entertainer take this. And she also bought them matching shorts, I guess, because she said she was turned off by the way they would kind of come in to the room, and she didn't like what they were wearing. So she bought them matching shorts. And yeah, that was pretty much the gist of today. Again, this is a shorter video because really it was a short day in court. So yes, I'll be back for day 22. Thank you so much for listening to this daily Diddy Digest. We are on the U.S. versus Sean Combs, day 22. And it was a really weird morning. We started very, very late. Jane did not get back on the stand until about 11 a.m. There seemed to be some evidentiary issues, which were going pretty smoothly. One in particular was about the government wanting to introduce a journal entry, they call it, or a notes section from Jane's phone. And this was Jane's feelings about that she jotted down about Diddy, but it was post Cassie's lawsuit. So the defense was arguing kind of, you know, this should not be admissible because she saw the lawsuit, she saw how much Cassie got, and then she started, writing these journal entries or in her notes section. So the judge, did not make a ruling on that right away. But again, everything seemed to be going smoothly. And then he was passed a note by the clerk, and that caused a roving room meeting. Again, a roving room meeting is off the record, but they were in there for a super long time, enough time to get all of the media in the courtroom talking. So the rumor circulating, and I believe this is fairly accurate, but I don't know all the details. But it's twofold. Okay, so the roving room issue, I'll go over what I know from that. But Kanye West apparently flew into New York or Newark very recently and was supposed to come to the trial. He was not in the courtroom. I do not think he was around the courthouse because we would have heard about it. But I did hear from someone very close to the case that yes, he was supposed to come, but he did not. So we'll see. But when the lead attorneys from the defense and the government got out of the roving room, Mark Agnifilo said to the judge, Judge, just one more thing here. I just want to make this argument clear because I felt like I wasn't clear in the roving room, and I also want to do it in front of my client, in front of Sean Combs. And he said, and again, we're all lost. We're like, what is going on? I mean, still, we don't know what's going on. We've been sitting there for what seemed to be over an hour. And he said, trials are public for a reason. When trials are public, the public can follow them and then even come forward with information that they may have about what they heard in the trial. And then he said, and that's exactly what happened. And he brings up an incident from a hotel incident from January 2024 in Las Vegas. And since we have Jane on the stand, we did hear about a trip she took to Vegas with another rapper and his girlfriend. And we hear the defense say that they want all the names mentioned, that all the names should be public. And the government argued that these names mentioned from this Las Vegas trip should not be mentioned. And the judge ruled with the defense, or with the government. So names couldn't be mentioned, but Agnifilo wanted all of this on the record. And it was a little confusing, but also we learned a little bit more about this January trip, and I'll get into that. And the other big things, I guess, from today is the government wants juror number 6 removed, and we don't know exactly why. They basically cited lack of candor, and I think that's because of social media. But the defense is arguing that because he's one of the, I think it's the 3 or 4 Black jurors, they want them to stay. So the judge should rule on that pretty soon. He did not rule on that today. And they confirmed 100% now that victim number 3 was Gina. And Gina has been brought up a lot in this trial. She was a girlfriend of Diddy's, made the other women very jealous. She was younger. She was supposedly causing all these problems. I mean, who knows? But she is not testifying, though. So there's that. But anyway, just finishing up with Jane, I should say, we went through some text messages from October and November and December of 2023. And Diddy and Jane had broken up in October of 2023. She was upset about a trip that he took to London. And then in November, Cassie's lawsuit came out, and Jane describes it as being a really emotional time for her because she's reading the lawsuit and she didn't realize that Cassie went through and was doing what she was doing. So she, I guess, had shared this with Diddy via text, saying, I didn't want to do this. I just loved you, and kind of told him all of this. And he said back to her essentially that he was just learning this for the first time, or he just didn't realize that she felt this way. And I think the defense was really trying to bring his mindset out, like he wasn't aware. She never said anything like this to him directly before. And they played parts of an audio message that he sent her, and some parts were redacted, but essentially he said, I don't ever want to make you feel like this. How do we move on here? How do I make this right, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in December of 2023, we have text messages between Jane and Diddy, and they essentially have Jane saying that she wants $100,000 per year that she was with Diddy doing these hotel nights, which would be 3 years. And she wants her house continued to be paid for. And she wants the love contract to be seen all the way through. And I don't know what happened. We did not find out if he paid her this $100,000 per year. That wasn't brought up, but we did see that. And Diddy made sure, I guess through KK, that her rent was paid, and he didn't bother her or contact her at all for the entire month of January of 2024. And the defense, Tenny Garagos, made sure to say, well, okay, so you also talked to your friends about Diddy when you guys were broken up during this period, and your friends said something along the lines of, let me find it. You set the tone for this, meaning the hotel nights. What do you expect? And there was also a text from one of her friends after they returned from Paris during the month of January 2024, where Jane said, now I need a Saudi prince. And that same month is when she went to Las Vegas with another rapper and his girlfriend on his private jet. And this trip, we learn more about this trip. So they get to Vegas. She said they went to dinner, and then they went to a strip club, and then back to a hotel. And at dinner, she saw Anton, who was this adult, or is this adult film star that she and Diddy had used. And apparently he knew this rapper. And Tenny Garagos made sure to say that this was an iconic rapper that was very close to Diddy. So I also was speculating Kanye West, because we had heard some things in the morning. And I was also thinking that maybe Kanye wouldn't be allowed to come if this was actually him that was being talked about, because it might be intimidation to Jane. Who knows? But again, I don't know. I'm speculating. So they, she sees Anton, she greets him, acts kind of, not surprised, but she is surprised. So they go to dinner and a strip club and back to the hotel. And Jane says that at the hotel that night, they're like partying, and Anton is having intercourse with a woman on the bed of the hotel, and 7 or 8 of them are in the room partying and watching. And then she says that this iconic rapper came on to her and said that he has always kind of wanted to do her, essentially. And that's kind of how it came out. So, and then Tenny Garagos said, well, was this before or after you flashed your breasts? And Jane said, yes, I did do that. I don't remember when it was. I was just having fun and dancing. So again, my speculation here was that maybe this iconic rapper heard part of the testimony and was like, oh, let me help you out and tell you what else happened, type of thing. Again, I could be wrong, but that's where my brain went. So we hear about this. Then we hear about the fact that in February of 2024, Jane missed Diddy so much that she gets back together with him and she goes to Miami, and it's her birthday. And we also learn that Jane has had multiple meetings with the defense as well. And the government has been present along with her lawyers. And in February of 2024 in Miami for her birthday, she describes, she and Diddy missed each other. They had butterflies, and her birthday was amazing. He set up this amazing dinner and, got her so many gifts, and it was just everything she wanted. And Tenny Garagos says, well, do you remember telling us at this one meeting that because your birthday was so perfect and special, you agreed to an entertainer / escort that night on your birthday because Diddy made you happy and you felt like, yeah, you would do this. You agreed to it. And she said, yeah. So that was also a moment that I kind of saw some jurors like look at each other like, oh, okay. And then we got to the fight in June of 2024, where Tenny Garagos had said, Mr. Combs was under immense pressure. He was super stressed. There was a federal investigation into him. And essentially the whole discussion about the fight was that Tenny Garagos wanted to make it clear that Jane started the fight. So she kind of said, okay, well, you were the one that kind of smashed his head into the marble, and you didn't have proof that he was with a woman on this trip that you thought he was. He was with his family, and his family was posting about it on social media. It was public, kind of meaning like you were off base by smashing his head into the marble. And then she goes and goes through the entire fight where she kind of says, okay, so you ran into this room, then you ran into that room, then you ran out, meaning like he wasn't hitting you at this point. He didn't put his hands on you. And she also wanted to make it clear to us that Jane was calling Diddy some really bad names, like rhymes with edophile, because she was talking about Gina, who is of age, but obviously very young. She was calling him a monster, saying he was disgusting, throwing candles at him and her champagne glass. And eventually, she says that, yes, he put her in this chokehold. She runs away. And when she comes back, Tenny Garagos had said, okay, well, when you got back, it's not like he just started pounding on you right away. And she said, no. And she said, you went to the patio and he was there, I guess, and you started calling him names again. And she said, yes. And then it escalated into her punching him in the face and then him punching her back, but like hard and twice. So yes, we heard that. And I think, again, that's what she just wanted to reiterate, that Jane started it. And then, redirect, Maureen Comey kind of just brought us back a little bit with just Diddy dangling the house over her. Text messages again where she said she wasn't comfortable, and it was just more of the same that we had already heard during direct. So I am ready for a new witness tomorrow, so we'll see. And maybe Kanye will be at court. I will keep everybody posted, and there is never a dull moment, let me tell you that. All right, thanks for watching. This was day 22 of the United States versus Sean Combs. Hi, Crime Junkie Jury. I'm Lauren Conlin, and I decided to give you a little bit of an authentic wrap up. We ended a little bit early today, so it's day 23 of the United States versus Sean Combs, and I am outside of the federal courthouse doing this recap for you. So right away, we discussed juror number 6, or not right away, but before we heard from the first witness. Juror number 6, it turns out it wasn't as salacious as we originally thought what happened with this juror. He seemed to have indicated a district that he lives in during the voir dire and during some of the questioning that wasn't consistent as to where he apparently lives right now. And I guess this came up because in conversation, a very innocent conversation with a juror staff member, he kind of just said this, and the juror staff member brought it up to the judge or to the government, and they decided to question him. Two different instances of questioning, and the defense was kind of like, yeah, it was just a mistake. It wasn't anything nefarious, and the government seemed to think that there might be some deceit there, so they were pushing to get this juror removed. The defense also said that he is one of 4 black jurors, and it would be extremely prejudicial to remove him, and it would be a bias. And the judge actually came out and said, look, if he is removed, it has nothing to do with bias, so let's get that out of the way. However, the judge didn't really think it was a big deal, and he suggested that they question the juror for a 3rd time, and the defense was like, actually, we have a problem with that, because if he's questioned for a 3rd time, this could affect him during deliberations. He might feel singled out, and we just think it's very excessive. And they even said, look, Your Honor, we are willing to waive any appellate issues, any appeal that might happen if Mr. Combs is convicted with this juror. still remaining on the jury. And they even went as far to say, as Mr. Combs agrees as well, he will waive all rights to appeal. And the judge said, Mr. Combs, is that true? And he says, I waive. And he actually kind of did the waive there. So I believe they are going to question this juror further. Maybe this afternoon. I stepped out really quick to do this video because things did end in terms of testimony. So we'll see what happens. But I have a feeling that this juror is going to stay on the jury. Now, there also was some issues with the first witness, who was a special agent from Homeland Security. And that was essentially, the defense had some issues because there were some guns collected in evidence. There were 6 guns, and these guns, in a photo of the evidence, they were laid across these 2 chairs, and they were taken apart. The magazine was out, but the defense had a problem with this because the guns were found in a gun safe, apparently, but HSI didn't take any photos of the guns in the gun safe prior to them being kind of spread out on these chairs. And the guns were also found in a security room, which was meant for security only, but the HSI agent apparently didn't know this information, and also didn't have any photos of where they were before. So the defense was like, this is not fair at all, type of thing. Like, how you need another witness. Like, I don't understand how this witness is going to come on the stand and say all of this. And the judge is like, well, how did you guys not know that as the defense? Like, how did you know that he didn't know any of this? And I guess there was some kind of miscommunication. However, the remedy for that was the government was going to question him and say, make sure that the jury knew where the guns were, a security room, and was there a safe, et cetera, kind of opening the door for Mark Agnifilo, who did the cross, to really kind of hone in on this, which is exactly what he did. But back to the direct, the HSI agent, Special Agent Andre Lamont, he was the lead on the search and seizure of Diddy's, ow, I just got stung by a bug or something. Ow. Sorry. Okay. Wow. He was the lead on the search and seizure of Diddy's LA home, and we saw pictures. They seized 6 different weapons, and there was 1 Glock and 5 different rifles or AR-15s. One of these rifles was defaced, the others were not. And there were 6 envelopes of ketamine and 1 baggie of MDMA in a safe. And then there were 900 bottles of Astroglide seized and 200 bottles of baby oil. And these Astroglide bottles, these were actually stacked in boxes in a garage, which was so crazy. I mean, it was like 10 boxes. It looked like he had ordered off Amazon or something. And, that was pretty much the extent of the direct. It was kind of just what they found, what they did. And during the cross-examination, again, Mark Agnifilo really wanted to make it clear that the 6 guns they found, they were in a security room that had a lock, and, photos were not taken, but these guns were in a safe. He talked about how there was lots of bedrooms in the house, children's rooms, and nobody saw any guns or anything dangerous in any other room besides the security room. And he also said, Agnifilo kind of said, you testified you've done 50 to 60 searches, and you work in the human trafficking department. How many searches have you seized baby oil and Astroglide as it pertains to human trafficking? And the agent said, 1. It was this one. And Agnifilo kind of said, okay, and you saw the baby oil and the Astroglide. It was in many different rooms of the house, because it was in the master bedroom, in the closet, in the garage. And he said, yeah, it was all over the house. And then Agnifilo said, and the guns, they were only in the security room, locked. And he said, yes. So that was that. And then after that witness, Maureen Comey stood up, and she actually said that Diddy was nodding his head again and during cross-examination, and he did get scolded the other day for nodding his head at the jury during cross-examination, or last week. It was last week during Brianna Bongolan's testimony about the balcony incident. And Brian Steele actually said, Your Honor, Mr. Combs has been nothing but professional. I'm sitting right here. He's done nothing wrong. And the judge was kind of like, look, it's tough to not get a reaction. We're going to get reactions here. So Mr. Combs also, he was
kind of admonished last week, so it would be silly of him to look at the jurors. So, everyone just be an adult here and do the best you can. So, I mean, look, Diddy does nod. I did not see him look at the jurors nodding, but he does. He nods his head from time to time. Now, the next witness was Jonathan Perez. He was Diddy's assistant from 2021 to 2024. And essentially, he's corroborated testimonies about setting up hotel rooms for what they called, quote unquote, king nights. So he talked about these king nights for Diddy doing, getting baby oil or oil, condoms, whatever. He, went shopping for outfits sometimes. And we heard, what else did we hear? We heard that he would get cash from security to buy this stuff, or he would use his company card. We also heard that he worked from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then we kind of heard just some things that I believe were meant to corroborate some things that Jane said, as well as, let me just get to the... He talked about during direct a FaceTime that he got from Diddy, a very quick one, the night of Jane and Diddy's big fight on June 18th, 2024, the physical fight. And it was essentially Diddy just being like, hey, there was no other woman with me on this trip, right? And he's like, yeah. And again, I think they were just trying to say that this happened on June 18th because he called his assistant. There was also a recording that KK took about a video of Jane having intercourse with another man who was black while Diddy watched, and it accidentally somehow got on this business iPad, an iPad that the staff used, and KK was recording this conversation with Jonathan Perez, trying to figure out how it got there, who saw it, and Jonathan, I guess a videographer saw it named Brandon, and I think the chef saw it as well, but Jonathan seemed to protect the chef, wouldn't say her name, and they were trying to get to the bottom of that. Eventually, he was told to just delete it. And let me make sure I'm not missing anything big here. Yeah, I think that was the extent of the big points during direct. And then during the cross, just to go back to the iPad thing, Brian Steele did the cross, and he just was kind of like, well, this iPad was for business and not for personal. So KK was just trying to get to the bottom of this to delete the video, et cetera, et cetera. And then as far as the FaceTime goes, they were just minimizing that, being like, it was just a FaceTime to be like, hey, nothing happened. And Brian Steele also wanted to point out that Jonathan Perez, he actually said, what is the percentage of personal things you would do for Diddy versus professional? And he said, 1% personal, 99% professional. And Brian Steele was like, yeah, because, with any celebrity, they have assistants, and their assistants are going to do some type of personal work. That's just that's a general thing, because Jonathan Perez had apparently worked for other celebrities, and he said, yeah. And we then saw text messages between Jane and Jonathan Perez, which were indicating to me there were just a few different instances where she was asking him to do stuff for her, help her set up hotel nights. They would text back and forth, and he would say, oh, breakfast, the chef made you avocado toast with an egg white. And she'd say, oh, can I have OJ and tea? And he'd say, sure. They talk about outfits. I mean, it was a lot of back and forth. And Brian Steele was just like, okay, so at any point, did you sense that Jane was uncomfortable, that she was being coerced? Did you think she wasn't a willing participant? And he said no to all of those things. And she also said, Jonathan said that this was just sort of like a regular thing for them, how they would text. And then Brian Steele just wanted to put that out there. So Jane felt, comfortable with you. She texted you. She was always around at Mr. Combs' home. And she didn't seem upset. And he said no. So that was, and then there was a redirect where they sort of honed it back in a bit, per the usual, just kind of showing us that he, got drugs for Diddy at one point, which he said he did. He got marijuana for Diddy. And again, Brian Steele said during the cross something like, he didn't get enough drugs for drug trafficking, just a couple $100. And there was an objection, but made his point, I would say, for the jury. But yeah, that was pretty much the extent of today. I will hopefully have an update on the juror issue soon as well. But next week, we should be hearing from a summary witness first. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening to day 23. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot the most important thing. Or not the most important thing. Wow, Kanye West was here today. Now, I had talked about how there were rumors that he was coming, and there is a very strict list to get into the courtroom. And the federal marshal told me today that he could not get in because he was not on the list. I spoke to Diddy's friend who's been in the courtroom every day, pretty much his only friend that's been consistently in the courtroom. And he said, oh no, Kanye could have gotten in, but he didn't want to go into the courtroom because he didn't want to disrupt anything. He went to the overflow room for about 20 to 30 minutes just to support Diddy. And I was like, whoa, okay then. So it was a whole thing. And then Kanye left to go to lunch with Diddy's son, Christian. So, okay, now that is it for day 23. All right, I'll see you guys next week.
All right, so a couple things just to wrap things up. I don't know about Kanye being on the list. I have to say, I went back to double check with the federal marshal in the courtroom, and he said Kanye wasn't on the list, and he even said you can check the list yourself. You can go back and look. He wasn't there. We'll show you. So who knows? I mean, could Kanye have gotten into the courtroom? Maybe. And did he just go to the overflow room to be nice? I mean, perhaps. The Kanye we know in the media, which could be a completely different person, would probably not want to do anything low-key. He seems like he really does want the attention on him, but hey, what do I know? And then back to the juror issue. My opinion on this is, I do think it might not be great if they do dismiss this juror, because I think it will raise some appellate issues if Diddy is convicted. I think it's just, going to be super easy for the defense to be like, okay, well, you saw this juror's face. You saw that he was reacting in this manner, and he is one of the very few black jurors. So, we don't think it's fair. So we'll see. I will update everybody on what goes on. And as always, please follow my real-time updates on X, on YouTube, on TikTok, and subscribe and like my YouTube channel if you haven't already at Pop Crime TV, or subscribe to The Outlier wherever you listen to audio podcasts. All right, guys, thanks for listening. I'm Lauren Conlin.